Hi everyone, William again here. Just a quick word again to thank you for the continued uptake across the globe. It's actually probably the most mind-boggling part is that we have downloads from Brunei, Brazil, Kenya, Malta, Japan, Costa Rica, Switzerland, Cape Verde, Australia. I already mentioned in the last episode. So yeah, it's really heartwarming and encouraging and inspiring to keep going. Father Shaq and I again are very grateful. Speaking of Father Shaq, today you'll hear him talk about holy orders and what his personal inspiration is to become a priest. I hope you do enjoy again the personal aspect of it and the conversational aspect of it. If you want to hear more about Father Shaq, you can log into parish.nl every Sunday, where we have a mass at 10 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. CET, where you can hear him live from the pulpit, where he has beautiful sermons and you can follow beautiful mass. And lastly, please look us up on Instagram, on Facebook, Cross-Examination, where you can drop a comment or ask a question, and we would love to address your questions and talk about what you guys want to talk about. So again, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. Today, as I said, we're talking about holy orders, and so I will very much pass it over to Father Shaq. Father Shaq, to begin, what are the origins of the sacrament of holy orders, and how has its understanding evolved throughout church history? Let's begin nice and wide, St. Peter, and from there, let's maybe pick it up from there.
Well, of course, holy orders, or the whole idea of setting apart a certain group for the sanctification of life. So the idea of priesthood comes from the Old Testament already, in the tribe of Levi, Exodus. Priests offered sacrifice and acted as mediators between God and Israel. And this was seen as the foreshadowing of Christ, the high priest. And in the New Testament, Jesus chose the 12 apostles and gave them authority to teach, to sanctify, to govern, as you can see in Mark and in Matthew. And of course, at the Last Supper, Jesus instituted the Eucharist and told the apostles, "Do this in memory of me." And then he kind of, with the institution of the Eucharist, also gave that privilege to these apostles to continue that breaking of bread and also uniting the community. After the resurrection, Christ breathed on the apostles and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you forgive are forgiven." So that idea of confession and to bring people back, restoring their lives to the community, restoring their souls, and be the instruments of God's love and mercy in that sacrament, rather than of judgment. So that forgiveness is a gift that sanctifies the world. And then, of course, the apostles ordained successors. So then you started the whole idea of, who were the successors, the bishops, the deacons, the priests. Now, there are three forms of holy orders, these three.
Deacon, priest, and bishop, right?
Priest, and bishop.
Yeah.
So, and everybody has his own task. So the bishops will be the successors of the apostles. They govern a wider area, as we say, a diocese. A priest is involved in the pastoral and sacramental duties, most of all in a smaller area in the parish. And the deacons serve the community through charity work, and they can be married, and they can assist with funerals, with weddings, with baptisms, and preach, and also do the care for the poor, the charity work. So the diaconal work of the church is very much the extension beyond the sacrament of word and deed, making it happen. And We in our parish also have a deacon, Deacon Paul, who is a medical doctor. So he has his medical practice, and at the same time also he acts out as a deacon in several areas within the parish. So in a very short nutshell, that is how it evolved over the last 3,000 years, this idea of setting a certain group of people apart for the sanctification of life.
And this might sound like a very silly question. There'll probably be a few of those. But you mentioned deacon, priest, bishop. So does that mean that you could be ordained straight into a bishop role, or do you have to kind of, as in, I have a corporate background. Do you have to climb the ladder? First manager and then senior manager, director. And the reason I'm asking is, well, why isn't cardinal in that list?
Yes.
So I'm a bit confused as to how
how that works. Yeah. Well, in order to become a bishop, you need to be a priest first. So every bishop is a priest,
right?
Also, and has been a deacon as well. There are two forms of diaconate. Transitory diaconate. Okay. So that means that's the diaconate before you become a priest. You are a deacon for a certain period. Or a permanent diaconate. So that means you will always stay as a deacon.
Okay.
And when you are married, you can continue that permanent diaconate. Once your partner dies, then it is not that evident to marry again. I mean, that takes a whole process. It is possible, but normally that would require a dispensation. It's not in that case. But cardinal is just a kind of a promotion, an elevation. So it's not a sacrament. So a cardinal, the group of cardinals that elects the new pope, you don't need to be a bishop to be a cardinal. You can be a deacon, or you can be a priest, or so.
And go straight up to cardinal.
You can go straight up to cardinal. Yes, absolutely.
And so technically, you sitting in front of me could technically become the pope. The next pope.
Yes, then
it's very unrealistic.
As a pope, then that person also becomes the bishop of Rome. So then, of course, you would have to be ordained bishop. But yes, in theory, in canon law, it's possible for an ordinary priest to be a cardinal and then join the conclave. And if that priest is elected as pope, then yes, he needs to be ordained bishop because he becomes bishop of Rome.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying that. I mean, this is the more kind of historical, hierarchical part of it. I think a lot of listeners, including myself, would be very keen to better understand it from your personal perspective. Obviously, you have been through that process. Maybe let's start at the genesis of it, pun intended. What inspired you to become a priest in the first place?
Well, it was not any flash from heaven or any voice in my head, as they call the word vocation. It comes from vocare, it means voice, calling. But basically, I was an altar server and I liked it, so... And then I came to the awareness, I come from a small village, as I said before. I came to the awareness once that, a priest, in the way that my parish priest talked, is an educator and also a person who can set things in the community in motion. And that became very clear to me during a funeral once of a bishop who was a missionary in our parish, and he had worked his whole life in the missions, and he wanted to be buried in the Netherlands. So they brought his body back, and there were a few concelebrating bishops. And then in our parish church, so all of a sudden the world church was present in this small village. We kind of thought, we belong to a much bigger network than just this village church. And then, this bishop made it very clear during that homily. He said, you are now, this was in the early 70s, I must have been 11 or something like that. The church was packed, and he addressed the whole crowd, and he said, this bishop has always worked in a third world country, but he had his own room, his own bathroom, he had access to healthcare, he had a good quality of life, people cared for him. And at the time, they were making a decision in our village whether to construct a new shopping center, which meant a plastic sort of construction of 6 shops with a glass roof over it, or a home for the elderly who still lived separate, men and women in different homes from the St. Vincentius organization with a stove in the middle for 6 people in one room. And then imagine the village opted for a shopping center because modernization and all that. And then he said in the very full church, looking straight at the mayor, he said, well, actually, these old people have worked for your wealth to go shopping in that center. But they have to cram up at 6 people in one room and be separated from their wives, because this is how you care for the elderly at this stage in a first world country. So then for me, the penny dropped that social justice and scripture and justice as a whole can be combined through faith, and religion can really make a difference in creating a sort of a moral compass and ethics. So that for me was the first awakening of scripture actually having an impact on society. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And then I went home, and I think I said that in other podcasts already. My mom said, no way.
What was her concern, actually?
Well, she said, you love life far too much. You need people, a family. You need, you need somebody close to you. That whole celibacy thing is no way that is not going to be your lifestyle.
I mean, thank you for the little segue into, I think, what a lot of people would like to hear more about, the celibacy part. But before we dive in, your mother arguably knows you very well. Was your mom? Did you find it hard?
Oh, I found it terrible. Terrible, of course. Imagine, I was 26 when I went to Copacabana. Yeah. As a young missionary priest, blue eyes, I still had blonde hair, of course I looked like a god, I was ready for life. And then you see the sensuality of Brazil. Oh my God, I thought.
It's a clash of two worlds.
And now, for the rest of my life, I could just see but not touch. That was damn difficult. Of course, I fell in love many times. But it's a matter of it's a growth process, a matter of being able to talk about it. That's extremely important. Having human and humorous also and understanding colleagues who go through the same struggle, of course. So don't hide your emotions and your feelings, and sometimes it is just necessary to know if you choose something, you always have open doors, but also some doors closed. You have options and limitations. And somehow that also creates the wealth in life. If you count your blessings rather than your losses, then that is a spiritual path, but also a physical path, and it's a learning process for the rest of your life. So,
is it in some shape or form a grieving process? Because you are, to an extent, basically sacrificing a big part of human life. I find it quite, very basically, quite unnatural, to abstain yourself, the celibacy, and then we can still, is there a discussion to be had? Is there a difference between celibacy and abstinence? Two different things, but it feels like a huge sacrifice, really.
Well, the word celibate, strictly speaking, means single. So within the thinking of the church, if you are not married, you are single. And if you're single, only sexuality happens in sort of traditional church thinking within marriage.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we know that is totally not the case, but still, for church thinking, you should preserve yourself until you have the right to be intimate with someone, to vows and all that. And that's the same for priests. But of course, celibacy only came in the 12th century. So for much longer in church history, have priests not been celibate than actually celibate. and celibacy came in, we have spiritualized it now tremendously, of course, by saying, yeah, you have to be available to God and to your people, and it will help your spiritual path. But let's not forget, it was an extremely, pragmatic decision.
What prompted that decision back in the 12th century? I mean, I'm sure there's, different interpretations of it, but in your interpretation, why did the church adopt the practice of celibacy?
I think in the Middle Ages, the early Middle Ages, the church started to grow as an institution in material wealth, in power, in political presence, also in spirituality. But it was very much the material aspect that was important, the building of cathedrals, the siding with monarchies, the political power of Rome, the expansion through colonialism, of course, came in. So, the imposition of your faith as the true faith, and it was through that you could be saved. It was a kind of a theology as well. So they needed an army that was ready to go through a vow of obedience to wherever they were sent. And of course, if you have a family and if you have children, you are much more difficult to move around. So the flexibility of people to move them around the world. Secondly, the whole issue of inheritance. Once you have a family, okay, you may have been a very successful priest, so therefore people donated stuff to the church. The churches were embellished with works of art, with candlesticks, with God knows what, silver, gold. And so if a priest dies, then the partner could say, yes, but this church only got it because he was so successful. So is it from the church or is it from my husband? So of course, the church was very clever in saying, okay, these celibate people, they look for comfort and support among each other, among their orders, their religious orders, their brothers, their sisters, the nuns, the religious brothers. Let's not forget that not only priests are celibate, but also the brothers and the nuns, of course.
We'll get to that.
So, that is where your family support comes from, and that is where also you share your wealth, your spiritual wealth, your material wealth. And of course, it is in Christ that you should see your fulfillment and not so much in material or in social success. So the awareness came from a combination of spiritual, but also very political.
Strategically moved.
So, and later, of course, we spiritualized it. Oh, yes, you have to be. But I think the church became extremely powerful, rooted in society, and well established because of celibacy. It was a very clever move.
But and I understand the moves, and it's all very rationally to be explained, but you knowing this, that it finds its origins in a more strategic motivation as opposed to a spiritual motivation, does that not make it even harder to, I guess, accept that and live that celibacy?
Well, we, thank God, in Mill Hill, we had a very open-minded formation, which made it something, because you were there in your late teenage years. I went to the seminary when I was 16, and I was ordained at the age of 26. So, okay, you have 10 very important years of discovering your sexuality and who you are and how you deal with it.
And again, it might be a silly question, but until you're ordained, anything goes.
Well, strictly speaking, you are not committed by vows, of course.
Yes.
But you are still single and not married, so officially you couldn't have sex because you.
I think the read between the lines officially. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, but of course, in the seminary, you become so close to each other, closer than brothers in your own family, because these are the discovering years. So you discuss everything. And especially when classmates leave, because they did find love, even though they would have loved to be priests and they would have been fantastic priests, because sometimes we thought the best always leave because, they were open to give and receive love. Yes, these are tremendous struggles for those who leave and for those who remain behind. But your question is, did it make it more difficult because you knew that it wasn't only a spiritual requirement? For us men, there is an element of choice. Yeah, because simply we were born as men, that we have the right to become priests, if you want to. So there is free choice. Now, for women, I think it's even more difficult. There are plenty of fantastic religious women who would have been excellent priests, but because of the mere fact that they were born as a woman, they cannot. And I always found that extremely unjust, much more unjust than the whole celibacy thing, because that's a matter of your own personal choice. If you say, I'm going for this lifestyle and this is the consequence, it is not something that you take as an aside, but it is something that you also learn to embrace as part of the package. And yes, it's not easy, but it takes also, if this is what I want to do, then this is what comes with it. Even I've done now more than 1,000 weddings in my life. I see that with a lot of couples as well. You choose for one, and that means that you cannot have all the others. That's also a damn difficult choice. And how many people within the relationship live celibate lives as well, for all sorts of reasons.
Very true.
So it is a bit of an identification. Also, as I said, you choose to open one door, and it means that other doors are closed. And I had the big luck in my life that I was always in a pastoral setting, in very exciting pastoral roles. But I think it is really difficult for colleagues who are not in a pastoral setting and who are bureaucrats, who don't have the support of a community around them. I see here in the Netherlands a lot of colleagues who have to work in empty churches, run from one church to another on Sunday morning, 3 different masses with people they hardly know, because in one parish you have about 5 or 6 churches to attend, but because you are like a parachutist, dropping into a community without really having a chance to know the community. But I've always had the luck to stay in a community where I have time to greet people at the door, to get to know the community, the group work and everything. Invest a lot, but also receive a lot. And I think for living a healthy single life, you still need love and affection. You cannot deal without it. And then you can make that, well, I don't look upon it as a sacrifice, because this is life, this is it. I mean, if I would be thinking, oh, what a big sacrifice I'm making every day, because then I will be miserable and depressed. No, you do it because you find joy in your life, and there is joy and affection and love that comes through so many different channels.
It takes many forms.
Yes, and also I think our personal connection with Christ is also a source of joy, but that has to be discovered not only in prayer, but also in what actually happens through being a priest in a community. You bring people together, you see the result of your work, you see literally people rising up from different situations.
You spoke about your relationship with Christ. I'm sure you have had maybe faith crisis, or difficult moments, or obviously for me it's perfectly acceptable to have these moments, even as a priest. I'm not sure what my question here is, but have you had moments where you had doubts?
Yes, I think my main faith crisis, it sounds very, but yes.
Maybe it's too
My
strong.
main struggle was during the time that I was in Kenya. I was very young. I was a deacon at the time. I asked to postpone my ordination because I didn't know whether this life was going to be for me. So I stayed as a transitory deacon for about 3 years, which normally would be about 6 months. But first of all, I thought, what am I doing as a white person in this culture, this context, what am I adding really to the quality of life? That whole struggle with, the Western world bringing evangelical or biblical values to Africa. To me, it felt extremely colonial. Yeah. And also when I saw the ways that the African church, on the one hand, extremely joyful and dancing and smiling and all that, but also extremely hierarchical. The bishops were like tribal chiefs, and the young church needs to establish its identity like a young country as well, by a lot of outward manifestations of power and social status. And I thought, this is not for me. So after...
I believe the term is white saviorism, right? I think that
you can put many labels on it, and we've all gone through that certain stage of development, of course. I also saw, but especially among the religious, the brothers and the sisters more than the priests, who lived lives of great humility and witness. I thought, these are the unsung heroes, but of course the praise always went to those who were in the spotlights, those who were in front of the crowds rather than among them. And I really needed to reevaluate from a faith perspective, from a vocation perspective. I thought.
So how did you reevaluate? Did you have to physically extract yourself from that situation?
Yes. I asked to go for further studies afterwards. Right. So I went to Louvain after that. And I must say, through a continuation of a good theology course at the Catholic University of Louvain, where they actually deconstruct an awful lot of things and then help you to build it up again. That was extremely helpful. It was, and also the conversation with fellow students. And in that time, it was, of course, in the 80s. The church in the Netherlands was changing a lot, and the church in Western Europe. And the whole idea of wanting to become a priest was questioned a lot. Right? They said, no, you have to be invited to the priesthood. You have to be called to the priesthood. It's not your decision, but it's the community decision. And anyway, it was also, God's call. How do you prove that? How do you declare yourself suitable for that ministry? A lot of questions that earlier on were not really dealt with at that deep level, but it certainly helped to sort of place my faith in a different perspective. And it has helped me a lot. And then, I must say, during next year, I'll be a priest for 40 years. And your crisis of faith doesn't come so much, but in my case, with the question about the existence of God, I must say I've never questioned that.
That's amazing.
But the question of how that God, becomes visible within the church, yes, so it was more a question of crisis of loyalty and allegiance to the church than a question
more the how than the if, or
than the question of faith in God. And I think in the end, my faith in God helped me to accept the limitations of the church, because when I joined as a priest, I had hardly ever heard about child abuse. Never, ever. I've never seen it during my formation, and if it were so, I would be the first to admit it. But thank God we were, it was a very, as I say, open and it was institutional, but within a very accessible and transparent way. It was not hierarchical in that sense.
That's something I think, again, a lot of people would like to talk or hear your take on it. The fact that women can become priests, right? So Henry VIII comes to mind. He created the Anglican Church. Quite famously, women can become priests there, or maybe they're different name, I believe. But anyway, long story short, what is your take on the fact that only men can become priests? And sub questions: is it also rooted in a more strategical genesis versus actual scripture? Because I know that there are some scriptures that indicate that women can perfectly become spiritual leaders, to put it that way. I'm answering my own question. Father Zach, what's your take on it?
Of course, you can explain scripture in many different ways. I mean, that Christ only chose men as his disciples, and the his authority was conferred onto the apostles. Of course, is now the argument for us to choose only men. And Pope John Paul II made that very clear in one of his exhortations that this is it, the discussion closed. From the Bible, you can also take a different approach if you want. I mean, it's the women that were the first witnesses of the resurrection. They stood under the cross. They anointed the feet of Jesus. And there were also women among the disciples, women of means who had the money for the disciples to do their work for the apostles. So yeah, I mean, of course, it can go one way or another, whatever way you want to explain it. But anyway, this is where
it has gone this way.
Has gone this way. I would certainly be in favor of the ordination of women. I cannot see a justifiable theological argument against it. So before giving up celibacy, I think because there is an element of free choice, I would give the choice, open up the choice to the other half of God's creation, and that is the women, as well to follow their vocation to the priesthood. Of course, and let's not forget, Pope Francis, he tried. But
he tried to reopen the conversation. He tried
about the diaconate for women to start with that, open the conversation. And in fact, during the Synod of the Amazons, there was a vote on allowing the viri probati, which means the married men who are in ministry of the church, to allow them to become priests in the Amazons as a sort of an experiment. And the majority voted in favor to ordain deacons as priests, married priests, and do it in the region of the Amazons. But then that was completely shut down by a lot of people within the church. And Pope Francis was faced with, okay, if I push this agenda at this particular moment, then I risk a schism within the church. So time, obviously, for that particular reason is ripe, but for the world church, it's not ripe yet. And it has to do with an awful lot of other reasons, politics and money, and right wing being very vocal. And but he certainly opened the door to that possibility. Of course, it's difficult because his predecessor, Pope John Paul II, made it very clear, and this is not the route that we are going, so that's it. But there is certainly, a move into the direction of, the door towards married clergy, married priesthood. Is it completely closed, or is there still a possibility? From the Synod also, I think the feedback from God's people was very much also, well, this needs to be looked at again. But
do you see it? Look, because I think there's also now in Dutch there's an expression, a nood breekt wet, meaning basically the means justify the end, or the end justifies the means. Sorry, and the end being that there is a definite shortage of priests. There might be arguably, I think, especially today, this day, a little bit of a resurgence in Christianity and spiritual life and religion in general. So there is this perfect storm, is a bit overrated or overexpressed, but is there now maybe an opportunity purely based in pragmatism and need to maybe reopen that conversation? Is that where the conversation is coming from? Is that where Pope Francis is coming from, do you think? As in, we need bodies, essentially?
Yeah. Well, it would certainly be a good argument. Yes, we need vocations. We need But yeah, whether the world is ripe for that, whether Pope Leo is going into that direction, I don't know. But if you ask me personally, I would certainly be in favor of having women as colleagues. And yeah.
What, just trying to, because obviously in our church there haven't been women priests. So what would be the kind of blind spots, do you think, for potentially the first women that would get into priesthood? Are there things that might be more difficult for women than for men in the role as a priest?
Well,
Or underestimated?
I think the difficulty would be more in the acceptance of the people
Right.
than in the quality of the person.
No.
So I think the role of a priest who is a comforter, a healer, a counselor,
All of these things about area,
all these things, of course, can be done by women as well.
are a very female attribute.
And
to begin with, we
well, I wouldn't say
carry
that. I wouldn't say that. But yes, it would for us mean, and I think it's also a big hurdle would be the clergy themselves, who would not accept women as their equal.
That's fair.
Because they have 2,000 years of tradition of only men.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with mixed monasteries or mixed, that becomes, and mixed clergy meetings and mixed authority and all that? So
it's a big challenge
for the clergy to actually give up their autonomy in a way. That would be a huge challenge. And for the people to get used to the idea will be quite a challenge. But yes, everything in the church comes out of real life. I mean, anointing, laying on of hands, breaking bread, all the sacraments, they all come out of life. So you can argue in many different ways, and we are not going to solve it here. And obviously, we are stuck. I won't see it happen in my lifetime. I'm sure of that. But I also think if we close the door and simply say discussion closed, we do both, I think, Christ and the church a big disfavor. The other extreme is what they are doing in the Anglican Church now. They have, in a very short time, moved extremely fast. So you have married clergy, and then you have, women clergy, then you have women bishops, and now, in order to prove the point, you have to have LGBTQ bishops that need to be appointed in any continent. Well,
to meet some quotas.
Some continents are not ready for that. And it's a very Western, and I'm sorry to say, of course, it's a very necessary area to pay attention to. But if you're in a survival and a struggle mode and God knows what, because you have no bread on the table, then the LGBTQ agenda is not the main priority for a faith community in that particular situation. So I think the Anglican Church is making the mistake of pushing their agenda, their political and Western agenda, too much, too soon. And and now the strange thing is, which is such also a door that we haven't really discussed among the clergy, but it's happening, that married Anglican priests who come back to the Catholic Church, they can be received as Catholic priests, married with their wives, and function in the Catholic Church.
Sounds like a loophole.
So it sounds like a loophole. And of course, some of our colleagues said, well, if I would have known that, studying in London, I would have taken that side road.
That's interesting. Is that a loophole that needs to be closed? Or
no, it exists, because within the mentality is somebody coming back to the mother church is more important in the spiritual path of a person. And then we take the wife on board as well.
Yeah.
Than this whole celibacy thing. So, yes, things are not written in stone as much as we think they are. So do we have married clergy within the Catholic Church?
Actually, yes. We do.
Well, married clergy as deacons, of course, already for a long time. But married priests also.
So, and just for the record, I personally believe that women should have the opportunity as well. And what I meant with what I said about female attributes, most of people working in healthcare are women. Most people work in education are women. My point being that I think women more than men are hardwired biologically for caring, and I think a lot of the pastoral work that you do is essentially care and love, and therefore women are maybe even more capable of it than we men are. That's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
I'm extremely grateful to Pope Francis, who has appointed some women within the Vatican positions. And it's a great step forward. We may think it's rather insignificant, but also that he appointed a few women to have the same vote as cardinals on certain issues was also a huge step forward. So slowly, things are moving. But yes, as I say, I won't see it happen within my lifetime. That's and I hope to live many more decades, but still. But that's it. Yes. But anyway, going back to holy orders, the church as it is now. Let's not also forget that there is the common priesthood of all believers. So when we are baptized, we receive also, in a certain way, orders. We are anointed as prophets, priests, and kings, the three groups that were anointed in the Old Testament. And we are, as baptized Christians, men and women, we are also anointed as part of the royal priesthood of all believers. So it means that through our baptism, we have a calling to make Christ visible and to represent it as Christians in the world. And I think we should somehow invest in that role a little bit more and not clericalize priesthood, thinking that any sanctification role in life is for the priest. No. As baptized people, we do this together. And a priest only has a function in a certain way as a servant of the community. And in that way, he makes Christ visible. Of course, he can perform certain things that perhaps the rest of the community cannot, but it is meaningless without a community.
Yes.
So it is a community who gives as much back of its own ordination to the priest that the priest gives to the community.
If there is still one of the biggest misconceptions about being a priest that you wish to kind of clear up for our listeners, do you feel that there are any misconceptions about priesthood?
Yes. Well, I think certainly a priest is not holier than a lay person. So I hate the word lay, as if you are completely not knowledgeable about the faith or religion. So the clergy as a group set apart, yes, we are set apart for a certain service, but it doesn't mean that you are different or more holy or
less human or more human.
Yes, exactly. So please look at priests as normal people, and normal is good. The more holy or the more weird people become, the more frightening or the more scary I think they become, because they institutionalize themselves. And once you start identifying too much with the institution, then your priesthood becomes your entire life, You're also a person. And if you are not in peace with being a person or at home with being yourself, then you are not at home in your priesthood either.
Is that part of the reason why you don't wear your clerical collar in public?
Well, I do wear it, but only when there is a function.
Yes. Yeah, but that's what I meant in public, but when it is everyday shack, not Father shack.
Yes. I would never deny the fact that I'm a priest, or when it's necessary, when it has a function, absolutely. But also, I'm not, I wouldn't say that they would hate me for saying, but I said I'm not married to the church by, sort of proving that, every day, 24/7, I need to be identified as such, yeah, a uniform has a function, but it doesn't define who you are. I think the role or the title, father or priest or pastor, is also very nice when it comes later in the conversation, when you don't present yourself immediately as such.
Do not have
And then
their-
people discover, oh, wow, after being a normal person, he also has that added value.
Yeah.
You get a different sort of entry into people's lives. When you meet a doctor, he doesn't wear a stethoscope around his neck the whole time either, but in conversation, when, it comes up that this is what he does for his life, then, okay, the conversation gets another dimension. But it's, for me, more an affirmation or a discussion, a conversation that you get as a bonus, perhaps, or as a grace or as an added gift. I haven't earned it, so I can't claim it all the time for myself either. I stand in it in that sense in a very humble way, but also the priesthood does not define me completely as a person, and vice versa.
Two more questions. One, slightly more humorous. You mentioned, when the situation calls for it. I immediately think of, what is the priest version of, say you're in an airplane, pilot becomes unwell, air hostess or air flight attendant comes in. Is there a doctor in here or is there a pilot in here? What is the priest version of that kind of story where you kind of like, I'm a priest, I can help? Is there a situation that ever occurred like that?
Yes,
what is the priest version?
Yes, strangely enough, I was. It's a very funny line. You don't know, but if they ask for it, is there a priest in the room? Of course, immediately.
But has there ever been a situation like that where
No, not in an airplane.
not an airplane, but any other situation?
But I was traveling with a doctor once when with Ben Vermin, but they actually asked, "Is there a doctor in the on the plane?" Yeah, that was very funny. And Ben is a good Catholic. He said, "Well, come along. You never know, But anyway, I was in a car once in Spain, and we were driving along the motorway, and we saw a man, a car stop, and then there were two people trying to reanimate a man, and we were driving, fast, obviously. So I was driving with another person. I said, "Well, of course, there's somebody, being really resuscitated. So let's stop." And I went over there. This was in Spain. It's a very Catholic country. And so I was with another guy who was for sort of, offering help, kind of phone an ambulance, this, that, whatever. And then I said to the people, I'm sorry, but, it's purely under these circumstances, I am a priest. Is there any way that I can help? And it became very angry. They said, "What? I mean, at this moment, you think of this," or it can evoke various reactions. So, of course, if I would have worn a uniform then, I wouldn't have to say it. Anyway, it was, nearly 40 degrees hot, and now it was on holiday, so of course you don't. But it provokes very different reactions. Now, within these reactions, you always are the face of Christ. And so you have to take that on board, and you shouldn't judge people and all that. But you also make yourself extremely vulnerable, because in a world where, let's say, here in Holland, 80% is extremely secular, being a priest nowadays, and nowadays perhaps a little bit less, but certainly, in the last 20 years, we were looked down upon hugely.
Yeah.
And in Ireland, I've heard stories of my classmates who were spat upon and hit because people were so angry with the church and what it stood for. It took courage to wear the Roman collar, because it stood for everything that people did no longer like about religion and about faith. So our generation has learned to love and hate the collar. It's a very strange. The new priests have no problem anymore with wearing the Roman collar.
Right.
Yeah, the younger priests, they feel extremely free with that. And I understand that, because they came in with less pain, baggage than we have.
Yeah.
Yes. And also, I was never raised with the whole idea. My parish priest in the 60s never wore a Roman collar. I've never seen him doing that. And we even had the general superior, bishop, who, when he was off duty, would never wear it either. We would always have a little cross on our lapel, and so identifiable as a religious person.
Yeah.
And I still do that when I go to receptions or something like that. But the whole color idea is still a personal struggle.
Okay.
I'm honest about
that.
Yeah.
And speaking of honesty, Father Shak, thank you so much for your openness, your talking about all these things. From my perspective, takes a bit of courage to kind of be so open and vulnerable in talking about these things. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you would like to talk about before we wrap it up? Anything you would like to convey to our listeners about priesthood?
I think the joy in the ministry, it really is a rewarding task, and it can give you a very rich and beautiful life. And now I'm 65, so celibacy is no longer such a huge issue. But the joy never failed, and somehow when you know who you are doing it for and who you are doing it with, and there I again come back to Christ and Christ within the people. Yeah, you are satisfied in many different ways, and that joy is such a great gift. And when I see the lack of joy in my colleagues, then of course all the other things become a much bigger issue. Then you look for compensation in different ways, in either drink or whatever, or authority, power, or material things, or sexuality, or God knows what. Then,
I guess you and I are both lucky that we are part of a very active and alive congregation. I think that definitely makes it things a lot easier.
You also choose that. I mean, you can channel within the church. The priesthood allows you jobs in so many different aspects of life. I mean, you can be an army chaplain, or a chaplain for circus and fun fair, or a bureaucrat, or a diplomat, or a prison, or a hospital, or parish, or whatever. So I think priests in orders or in dioceses, you also have to pave your own path. It's very good to be obedient to your superiors, but you also have to be obedient to yourself. The Holy Spirit also speaks in your own heart. And you have to do and choose something that gives you joy, not only out of sacrifice or obligation or out of need, because the church always has needs. It's all very good, but you can only be a positive contribution when you do it with joy.
Father Shak, thank you so much. Dear listeners, feel free to, again, engage with us through our socials, send in questions. Join us on Sunday from us. Father Shak has quite fantastic sermons every Sunday. So join us online again on the Mass on parish.nl if you cannot physically attend here in The Hague. From us, I believe that's it for now. Father Shak, again, thank you. See you next time.
William, thank you. And it's nice to see this podcast evolving because of your great help, man.
You wouldn't be there if it wasn't for you, Father Shak. So thank you again, and talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.